All right, group, this set of the notes is over chapter 52. This is just a brief overview or intro to ecology and then what the biosphere is. So things that you are focusing on being able to do or know, you should be able to tell me the role of abiotic and biotic factors in the formation of biomes. The features of freshwater and marine biomes, we'll get into that. You don't need to have anything of the particular biomes necessarily memorized. Just be able to see their characteristics, which is that third bullet point there. So the major terrestrial biomes and their characteristics. Ecology comes from the Greek root for ecos, which is the same as like economy. So ecology is the scientific study of the interactions between organisms and the environment. It will include both living or biotic and non-living abiotic influences or factors. Biotic factors or biotic influences are going to be anything that's living. So not just like plants and animals, but also fungi, bacteria, archaea, and protists. Abiotic influences are going to include things like the air, water and moisture, humidity, salinity, pH factors, anything that has an influence on the biotic factors. So there's biotic is living, abiotic is non-living. So, and we'll do some mini labs comparing the influence of abiotic and abiotic factors on biotic factors. If we are looking at the hierarchy here, this is actually starting with small and working our way up to large. So at the very top of this level is going to be what's called the biosphere. This is as though you could take the planet and pretend like it's like a snow globe, or it's what's called a closed system. So the biosphere is everything. It is the abiotic and biotic factors that really drive life. A landscape is going to be basically connected ecosystems. So the biosphere is going to be made up of several different landscapes. This can be the desert, which is then connected to a temperate forest, which is connected to a rainforest, which is connected to another desert. So the landscape is just going to be connected ecosystems. An ecosystem itself is a community of organisms plus the physical factors. So this is going to be all of the living stuff and all of the abiotic stuff. But the difference between a landscape and an ecosystem is going to be more specific, and it's going to have more in common. A good example of kind of how to think of this, ecosystems, when we go to the zoo, each exhibit is actually a different ecosystem. So the desert dome is a desert ecosystem. The aquarium is an aquatic ecosystem. So that's kind of what we're looking for. A community is going to be particularly living organisms, and it's going to be, again, we're just getting a little bit more specific, and it is going to be many different living organisms in an area. So in a community, that's going to include all of the living plants, all of the living animals, all of the living fungi, all of the living different bacteria. Key thing is that it's all biotic. A population is going to be a group of individuals of the same species. So just like if we take a population of students at Benson High School, we're looking at how many particular people of that group there are. And then organisms themselves, you can also call these individuals. So the organism is going to look at one particular individual of that species. So, and here is that hierarchy in pictures. Each of these will have a type of ecology associated with it. So we will study for sure population ecology and community ecology, and then we will see how those play into ecosystem ecology. climate is one of the things that works with ecology, simply because climate climate is going to be influenced by all of those abiotic factors. So climate is going to be long-term prevailing weather conditions in a particular area. Right now, our world is undergoing a lot of climate change. And so our climate is changing. It's becoming different, and we are actually feeling the effects of that. So climate is technically temperature plus precipitation plus sunlight plus the wind. And then those things, temperature, precipitation, sunlight, wind, will also influence things like salinity, pH factors, soil runoff, the size and speed of rivers. So all of this plays a role. There's a difference between what's called microclimate and macroclimate. Sorry, I said those in the wrong order, but macro and microclimate. Macro, anytime you see that root, it means large. So macroclimate is going to be work at seasonal, regional, or local level. Whereas micro is a small scale environment. So the example here is under a log, under a rock, anything that's really specific. But macro is what we typically look at, but then micro is what we can look at to indicate specific results from the change of climate. So climate change, some species may not survive those shifting ranges in temperature, precipitation, sunlight, and wind. The different biomes are ecosystems that are going to be found over very broad areas or very broad regions. So if we take a look here at our where we're located, so Nebraska is right about here. We're what's called a temperate grassland. Basically, the entire Midwest is a temperate grassland. We have very definitive summer, spring, fall, or summer, spring, fall, and winter. We have very specific seasons with very specific amounts of precipitation, wind, temperature changes, all of that fun stuff. There are certain areas in the world. So if you take, for example, this band right here across Africa. This is called savanna, as is down here. And over in South America, there are some bands of savanna, and then also in Australia. Savanna is going to be a little bit different than desert just because of the temperature and precipitation levels. But savanna is going to be basically, it's going to be hot all year round, with very little change in winter to spring to summer to fall. So each biome is going to be specific based on those climate factors. Okay, and that's just what I said. So climate, latitude, and elevation determine biomes. When we're talking about savanna, which is what this picture here is depicting, savanna is going to be partially determined by the elevation, where desert is typically going to be a lower elevation. So savanna is higher, desert is lower. A climograph means it is going to be just a way to show the relationship between temperature and precipitation. And we can graph these and chart these over extended periods of time. So if you are trying to do a climograph of a particular biome, and this is what climatologists do, is they actually look at these measures, and if there's a big change or a big shift in the climograph, that's a good indicator that there is climate change occurring. Biogeography is going to be exactly like it sounds. So anytime you see bio, that means living. Geography, if you take a geography class, that's things like mapping, using the use of landmarks to plot an area. So biogeography is using life to plot an area or to show the distribution of life. So factors that play into biogeography would be things like dispersal. How are these organisms moving, and how far away are they moving? One thing to kind of consider, one thing that, an example of dispersal, the average human, so across all of the continents, all races, all ages, all ethnic backgrounds, the average human will move 3 miles away from their home. So wherever they were born, the average human will move 3 miles away, which is crazy to think because in the United States, it is very common for people to like go off to college or to set out and make an adventure for themselves. But in other countries where it's more common to stay and help out your family and that community has a bigger meaning, humans will basically stay in their village or their community that they were born in until they die. Another factor is behavior. So that's habitat selection, making a habitat for yourself, making it habitable, making these conditions comfortable for yourself. Biotic factors that play a role in biogeography are going to be what other species are there, what food resources are available, the competition that's there. So what competition does organism 1 have for food versus organism 2? Pollinators and predators. And then the abiotic factors are going to be temperature, water, oxygen, salinity, sunlight, rocks, and soil. There is a reason that not very many humans, other than a few set scientists, live in Antarctica, and that is simply because the temperature is too cold to be comfortable to have that good behavior. There's not enough liquid water. There's no liquid water. And then in the winter, there is no sunlight. So these are all factors that play a role in biogeography, speaking specifically to humans, but we could also look at this in terms of other organisms, and we can also look at it in terms of organisms' behaviors, with when do they go in other places. So like migration, which we have already talked about in terms of innate behaviors. So that is it for some of chapter 52. It's kind of an intro to it. We will do more in class with the biomes and also with the hierarchies and looking at things like predators / consumers and producers. So if you guys have any questions, let me know. And if not, we will talk about these things in class. Have a good evening.